squirrels had overrun 3 churches in town. After much prayer, the elders of the first church determined that the animals were predestined to be there. Who were they to interfere with God's will? They reasoned. Soon, the squirrels multiplied, the elders of the second church, deciding that they could not harm any of God's creatures, humanely trapped the squirrels and set them free outside of town. 3 days later, the squirrels were back. It was only the third church that succeeded in keeping the pests away. The elders baptized the squirrels and registered them as members of the church. Now they only see them on Christmas and Easter. A bear walks into a bar and says, "I'd like a beer and some of those peanuts." The bartender says, "Sure, but why the big pause?" A grasshopper hops into a bar. The bartender says, "You're quite a celebrity around here. We've even got a drink named after you." The grasshopper says, "You've got a drink named Steve." A guy walks into a bar and there's a horse serving drinks. The horse asks, "What are you staring at? Haven't you ever seen a horse tending bar before?" The guy says, "It's not that. I just never thought the parrot would sell the place."
I had spent the late winter months waiting impatiently for signs of spring, when the first warm, sunny Saturday arrived. I eagerly unlocked the storm door and stepped onto our patio deck. I was pleased by the sight of green sprouts and the sounds of singing birds more than anything else. I delighted in the sweet aroma of the spring air. Knocking on the kitchen window, I beckoned to my wife to join me in enjoying the pleasures of the season. She quietly brought me back to earth when she reminded me that I was standing over the dryer vent, inhaling the scent of fabric softener.
I couldn't decide whether to go to Salt Lake City or Denver for vacation, so I called the airlines to get prices. Airfare to Denver is $300. The cheery salesperson replied, "And what about Salt Lake City? We have a really great rate to Salt Lake, $99. She said, "But there is a stopover." "Where?" "In Denver." She said, "How many deadheads does it take to change a light bulb?" 12,001. That's 1 to change it, 2,000 to record the event and take pictures, and 10,000 to follow it around until it burns out. Joe and Dave are hunting when Dave keels over, frantic. Joe dials 911 on his cell phone and blurts, "My friend just dropped dead. What should I do?" A soothing voice at the other end says, "Don't worry, I can help. First, let's make sure he's dead." After a brief silence, the operator hears a shot. Then Joe comes back to the phone. "Okay." He says nervously to the operator, "What do I do next?" After a long career of being blasted into a net, the human cannonball was tired. He told the circus owner he was going to retire. "But you can't," protested the boss. "Where am I going to find another man of your caliber?"
My wife was in labor with our first child. Things were going pretty well when suddenly she began to shout, "Shouldn't, couldn't, wouldn't, didn't, can't. Doctor, what's wrong with my wife?" "Nothing. She's just having contractions." A panda walks into a bar, sits down, and orders a sandwich. He eats, pulls out a gun, and shoots the waiter dead as the panda stands up to go. The bartender shouts, "Hey, where are you going? You just shot my waiter and you didn't pay for the food." The panda yells back, "Hey, man, I'm a panda. Look it up." The bartender opens his dictionary to panda, a tree-climbing mammal of Asian origin, characterized by distinct black and white coloring. Eats shoots and leaves.
Psychiatry students were in their emotional extremes class. "Let's set some parameters," the professor said. "What's the opposite of joy?" He asked one student. "Sadness." He replied. "The opposite of depression?" He asked another student. "Elation." He replied. "The opposite of woe?" The professor asked a young woman from Texas. The Texan replied, "Sir, I believe that would be good, yep."
A poodle and a collie were walking down the street. The poodle turned to the collie and complained, "My life is a mess. My owner is mean. My girlfriend is having an affair with a German shepherd, and I'm nervous as a cat. Why don't you go see a psychiatrist?" asked the collie. "I can't," replied the poodle. I'm not allowed on the couch. Q. Why are dogs such bad dancers? They have to left feet. Two campers are hiking in the woods. When one is bitten on the rear end by a rattlesnake, I'll go into town for a doctor. The other says he runs 10 miles to a small town and finds the only doctor delivering a baby. I can't leave, the doctor says, but here's what to do. Take a knife, cut a little X where the bite is, suck out the poison, and spit it on the ground. The guy runs back to his friend, who is in agony. What did the doctor say? The victim cries. He says you're gonna die. Did you hear about the weekly poker game with Vasco da Gama, Christopher Columbus, Leif Erikson, and Francisco Pizarro? They can never seem to beat the Straits of Magellan. Pan American Newsletter 6 guys are playing poker after losing $500 on one hand. Smith clutches his chest and topples over, dead at the table. To decide who's going to tell his wife, his buddies draw straws. Anderson picks the short one. Break it to her gently. They all urge. Leave it to me, he says. When Smith's wife comes to the door, Anderson says, your husband just lost $500 playing cards. How much? The wife yells, eyes blazing. Tell him to drop dead.
A duck walks into a drugstore and asks for a tube of chapstick. The cashier says to the duck, that'll be $1.49. The duck replies, put out my bill. A young man called directory assistance. Hello, operator. I would like the telephone number for Mary Jones in Phoenix, Arizona. There are multiple listings for Mary Jones in Phoenix. The operator replied, do you have a street name? The young man hesitated and then said, well, most people call me Iceman.
So a couple of years I moved out of state with a boyfriend. Was super excited about it, but for some reason had anxiety about being so far from friends and family. One of the ways my anxiety was coming out was with nightmares and night terrors. I'd wake up violently sitting up in a cold sweat, gasping and whatnot. On one particular night, I woke up to the sound of our doorbell ringing, which at 4 a.m. is fucking nerve-wracking. So I shook my boyfriend fully awake and told him I heard the doorbell and to go check it because I was scared. He quickly jumps up, puts on clothes and grabs a bat, goes all the way to the front door and opens it. I am scared shitless and am peeking around the corner watching it all go down. I see him step outside and I nervously await the verdict of the situation when I hear him call out to me, "Babe?" And I respond shaky, "Yes?" He stands in the doorway with a frustrated, tired look in his eyes and says, "We don't have a fucking doorbell."
Two doctors and an HMO manager die and line up together at the pearly gates. One doctor tells St. Peter, as a pediatric surgeon, I saved hundreds of children. St. Peter lets him enter. The next doctor says, as a psychiatrist, I helped thousands of people live better lives. St. Peter tells him to go ahead. The last man says, I was an HMO manager. I got countless families cost-effective health care. St. Peter replies, you may enter. But he adds, you can only stay for 3 days. After that, you can go to hell. A penguin walks into a bar, goes to the counter, and asks the bartender, have you seen my brother? The bartender says, I don't know. What does he look like? A pair of cows were talking in the field. One says, have you heard about the mad cow disease that's going around? Yeah, the other cow says. Makes me glad I'm a penguin.